What I find so often in this work that I do is the complete inability of evangelicals to look in the mirror and take a moment to think, could these voices of deconstruction out there have something valid to say that we need to hear? And generally they're like, oh, you're just somebody who grew up in the church and now you're hurt and you don't like it. But what do you say to somebody who didn't grow up in the evangelical church, joined the evangelical church in recovery, and now says, I'll never be part of that again, left community behind, left faith behind, maybe is struggling to know whether God is left behind? Is the evangelical church ever willing to look in the mirror and say, maybe it's us? My guest today on the podcast is somebody who's asking the church to consider that maybe it's not us, it's you. Why would a successful entrepreneur in Birmingham, Alabama, be a blue dot in the middle of a very red state and city, putting livelihood and relationships and even a little bit perhaps of just personal well-being at risk to say, I can't be a part of that anymore? Is the evangelical church ever willing to hear a story like that and say, maybe there is something we need to hear? Well, I don't know if the church will ever hear that, but I want you to hear from my friend, Lindsay, who is the Beham blue dot, the blue dot in the middle of Birmingham, Alabama, a red state. And she's really a fascinating creator on TikTok, a brilliant person, and you're going to love hearing from her. Also, let me remind you, in the middle of this podcast, you'll hear an ad to join my Pastor Paul Patreon page. It's where we get our financial support through your subscriptions to Patreon, and you get some access to some pretty cool stuff by doing it too. So please consider, as you're listening to our podcast today, jumping in on a subscription. That'll get you some cool stuff with our Patreon page, and also will help support the message that God is not mad at you that we send out through the Nonpartisan Evangelical and the work of Pastor Paul. Now, to Lindsay Beham Blue Dot from TikTok on the Nonpartisan Evangelical podcast, and Pastor Paul here at pastor-paul.com and the Pastor Paul YouTube channel. Hi, everybody. Pastor Paul here. Glad you're with me for the podcast today. And just always like to have a bunch of different voices as we're all on this journey of where are we going together. And so I'm glad you're with me today. And I'm really excited about my guest I have today, who is a new friend of mine. Of course, it seems like most of my new friends these days come through TikTok. And this is a really fabulous creator on TikTok. And her name's Lindsay Booker. And she joins us from Alabama and is one of my favorite creators in all of social media. So Lindsay, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
I'm so honored that you asked me to be here. So you're one of my favorite creators on TikTok.
Thanks. And so it's at Beham Blue Dot. Let me put that up there so people can see it. Now, what the heck does at Beham Blue Dot mean?
So Beham is Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm a blue dot in a red state. So, and I'm a bright blue dot in a very red state.
And how's that working out for you?
It's pretty lonely. So.
Talk about that a little bit, and where did the blueness come from? What sort of, have you been? Were you from a liberal-leaning family? Did you become liberal? What's that political journey been like for you? Maybe that's paralleled your religious journey along the way.
So actually, my grandmother is rolling over in her grave somewhere. I was born and raised Republican in Tennessee, very conservative family, and especially my grandmother. I remember her, she started taking me to DAR meetings when I was 5, and she checked me out of school to go hear George H. Bush speak and took me into the voting booth with her.
Now what's DAR?
Oh, the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Oh, okay.
You can imagine like a bunch of old white ladies in Tennessee in the 80s, that just sounds pretty racist. But,
that's all you need to say. A bunch of old white ladies in Tennessee.
Yes, having lunch. So But yeah, so I was raised Republican, and my father is very conservative. And I was really conservative in my 20s. And then I met my husband, who's from Alabama, born and raised. He was also very conservative. And I kind of went off the rails there for a little while, like watching Fox News, and I loved Bill O'Reilly and was that Greta Van somebody.
Western, yeah.
Yeah. And then we moved to Europe in our late 20s. And so we moved to Belgium, and I went over there, this like hardcore conservative, and we were just, look at all this, socialism over here. And then I came back a liberal. So, but there were a number of things that happened. That's when I started
So it's
leaning.
Europe's fault. Okay.
It is Europe. That's crazy, evil socialist, which Belgium isn't a socialist country, but it does have heavy social welfare programs. And, but what happened over there, one of the big things was, we moved there right after Hurricane Katrina. And so we started making friends. Like there's a whole expat community, and I met someone who was from the US, but very different from me. And I remember talking to her about Hurricane Katrina and, all the people who were stranded there. And we were having this conversation, and I was saying things like, oh, why are people stranded there? Personal responsibility. The government shouldn't get in there and save them. What about, why are they poor? They shouldn't be poor. Just say things like that. People should work harder. And she just sat there listening to me like rant and rave. And then she finally said, what about the elderly and the disabled? What were they supposed to do? And what do you say? I had nothing,
Yeah.
And I'm sure she was thinking like, what a horrible woman. She was right. But I was saying the other day, like I need to track her down and find her and tell her, thank you for changing my life. But that was the first, that was really when things started to change. And of course, living in Europe, I was pregnant there, and they have universal healthcare in Belgium. And I just got to see like there's a different way of doing things, and that, the American dream isn't maybe as dreamy as we thought.
Yeah.
But I liked the way of life over there, that it was, it's just such an easier way to live. It's not all about money, striving, get as much as you can, work as much as you can. So, and then I had children, and
I wonder sometimes if we shouldn't compel every American kid, like in their junior year of high school, to go live somewhere else than where they grew up, particularly out of the country, just to see another perspective. And, I've been on this journey a long time, but I have a group of great friends that I met through the church from Great Britain, and many of them living here in the United States. And the thing that really got me was the healthcare thing, that all of them were like, your healthcare system sucks. And we're like, no, it's the greatest healthcare system in the world. And they're like, no, it's awful. It's awful. And, when we start pecking at getting our own stories pecked away at just a little bit like that, we start to see a different perspective, don't we?
Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed is that medicine over there, they don't, they just don't hand out pills the way they do here. I have a friend who like fell down some basement stairs and like broke her arm, and they gave her ibuprofen, which was, and I saw a dermatologist there. I saw it, my OBGYN, of course, because I was pregnant. But before I was pregnant, I went in and talked to her about depression, and I'm thinking I was going to leave with antidepressants. And she was like, you're in a new country. This is a new experience for you. It's, it's lonely. Like, go take some primrose oil or something like that, and sent me on my way. Where here, it's get out the prescription pad and let's, so that was very different.
And you're in that space a little bit. I didn't fully introduce you to everybody, and you're an entrepreneur and owner of a successful business, and it's Pilates, right? So you're a little bit in the physical health space.
I am. So I'm Pilates Studios. I never name my business because I'm part of a franchise, and my crazy liberal views do not necessarily reflect those of other owners. So, but gotcha. But I'm in the Pilates business, and so I do believe that mindful movement like Pilates is so important for our mental health, for sure.
And that's Funny thing, we grew up thinking that was where demons would get to us by doing this. And I'll tell you, what intrigues me about your story, and I've had many great people that are going through their own deconstruction journey, which has become kind of a real buzzword now for us all in this. But really, what intrigues me, and I would love to hear how this has been for you as a journey, in that you didn't grow up necessarily. Now, you did say your grandmother is rolling over in her grave now, but in that right-wing evangelical space, that wasn't your upbringing, right? That was something you entered later in life?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was familiar with that. I mean, like my high school boyfriend was raised in that, raised that way. And obviously being in the South, being in Memphis, I did meet people who were, raised in that whole, right-wing evangelical. But yeah, it was later in life when I was in my mid 30s, I guess. So I was in mid 30s. I'm an alcoholic. I'm very open about it. I got sober 7 years ago. And when I was getting sober, that's when I really started to lean like heavily into my faith. We went to a Methodist church before, but, it was kind of like that high church, like go to church just on Sundays and get dressed up. And, in the South, like you have to put your kids in the smock clothes and all that. And, that we kind of did that, but I never really heard the gospel before. So, so we found a different church when I was really like at my rock bottom. We started going to a mega church, an Ark Church, which I won't name, but, and that's when, yeah.
Say more about that. An Ark Church. This is, we have an Ark Church in Fresno that's making some news right now, but tell what an Ark Church is.
I don't remember. What does ARC stand for?
It's ARC. I don't know what it stands for.
Remember.
I don't remember either.
It's a mega church. It's a mega church.
And it's a network of churches, right?
Network of churches, yeah. And they all kind of have the same playbook, and they are a church planting organization. I mean, they
Association of Related Churches. Google is amazing. You can find it right away. But and like I said, we have an Ark Church that's trying to buy a theater in our sort of creative gay pride parade space. And they're like, we're welcoming of everyone. And then you go read the credo of the Ark churches and the churches that are in it, and marriages between one man and one woman is right there. And I think in their top 10 points of belief. And so there's a little bit of sometimes an act like we're accepting of, say, gay people or marginalized people or ostracized people from the church. But once you get inside it, it's not quite so much, huh?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that really bothered me, was that when I first went to that church, that was the message that I received for sure. It's a real like love bomb, and everybody's welcome, and God loves the broken. It doesn't matter what you've done. None of that matters. You can be made new in Christ, and we accept everyone, hoping that you'll change.
Now let's pause for a quick word on coaching with Pastor Paul. Something I hear often, is a coach really worth it?
My name is Lacey, and I went through the Core Leaders Network coaching program with Paul, and it was completely life-changing for me.
It literally changed the whole direction of my life.
I learned so much, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect because so many things have changed at my place of employment.
Having a community of others who are on the same journey make it easier to look deeply in ourselves and start to accept who we are.
I was the type of person that would just adapt to my surroundings and sink back into the crowd. Paul was really great at digging to the core of who I am and helping me learn how to walk in my authentic self and embracing that with courage, without fear of what others think.
One day I was like, something's not right. This was my dream. This is what I thought I was called to forever. My head was spinning.
So often I'm told I never really thought about why I do what I do until I was in a cohort.
Diving in deep and taking a look at your strengths and weaknesses and being willing and really excited to grow.
What are the things that would cause me to not venture out into something new?
He also was able to help me form a vision and a mission for myself.
You're amazing. You've learned to cope with incredible stressors and hurdles to your well-being. Now let's make that life journey easier by asking questions and gathering tools for seeing and living life differently.
I was able to transition out of a ministry position I thought I would never leave. I'm really excited about it. I never would have moved out if I had not gone through the Core Leaders Network.
Without this program, I wouldn't have had such a clear vision moving forward how I can impact and encourage and bless people's lives.
If you're deconstructing your faith or your life beliefs, or maybe you're in a transition season, I can help you walk that journey out.
I can't recommend this program enough to people out there. It was truly a life transformation for me.
I will use all the information for the rest of my life. So thank you, Paul.
Jump into the Core Leaders Network. It'll make you resituate where you are and what you're doing, and may generate some new ideas and generate a whole new way of thinking for you. It literally changed the whole direction of my life for the better. Thank you, Paul.
Come on, live an abundant life as your best self. Join our September core cohort. Hi everybody, Pastor Paul here. So many of you are so gracious and great to say, how can you help spread the message that God is not mad at the world that we do here through the Pastor Paul work? One way you can do that is subscribe to my YouTube channel and sign up for notifications from it. Let me tell you, the reason I'm asking you to do that is because I've been on TikTok and Facebook and other social media platforms and have found that those platforms really are not fair to creators. Yes, TikTok has been great at helping me expand my message, but on any given day, they can just decide none of your videos are getting out anymore. And that's been happening to me for most of 2021. I've tried to work with TikTok to figure out how I can meet what they want and how I can serve them as they serve me as a creator. And you know what TikTok does? They have no way for you to talk to a human being, and you get almost no response from them ever. And I hear this from creator after creator after creator. And if there's a platform that doesn't believe in supporting its creators and being fair and moral with its creators, then I'm not sure that that's where I want to stay and keep my work. YouTube, on the other hand, has been great. They honor their creators, and they've come up with new platforms on an ongoing basis where I now can post memes and their new shorts feature, which is their version of TikTok. And so I want you to go over there and check it out. Having said all that, will you do this? You may be on YouTube watching this video right now. If not, go to the Pastor Paul channel. And when you get there, there's going to be a subscribe button and a notification bell. When you go to my Pastor Paul channel, you're going to see a subscribe button. Click on it, and you're now subscribed to my channel. And so when you go to YouTube, you'll see my content pop up. But you see this bell here? That's the notifications bell. If you click on that, then you'll see these come up, all, personalized, or none. Click on the all. Now, every time I put content on YouTube, you'll get a notification, and every time, including every time I go live. So you'll never, ever miss another live with Pastor Paul when I go live on YouTube. Would you do that for me? That's a favor that would help a lot. I want to grow my YouTube platform, and that's where I'm going to spend a lot of my time and efforts in the future, because I want to serve a platform that serves its creators and does it well. So do me a favor, go subscribe and click that notification bell on YouTube and help grow this message that God is not mad at you from Pastor Paul.
None of that matters. You can be made new in Christ, and we accept everyone, hoping that you'll change. They accept you the way you are, but there's an expectation that you change.
And how did you start to sense that and see that in your church?
It was really like more in the small group setting. It was one of those things like with LGBTQ, it's not really something they say out loud, or it's not something I heard a lot about. I can't even remember where I started like picking that up. But the big thing that happened was I was in a small group where the leaders started comparing Donald Trump to King David. And that's when I felt like, really knew, like, okay, something's really that guy. So that was a big clue. But there was there was a message early on. There was a message. The pastor, I remember so clearly him saying, like, talking about politics and saying, laws don't change hearts. Only God can change hearts. Laws don't change hearts. And so I thought, oh, well, this is great. Like, they're not into politics. This is not your typical, Republican. And it so was. They're saying God doesn't change hearts, but, laws don't change hearts. But they're actively like trying to change laws.
So were you sensing that there was something a little bit off from where you were going in your heart and maybe even your political views, that when Donald Trump was then sort of the final straw of like blowing the lid off of all of this and really exposing what the heart of it was?
Yes. So that was, Donald Trump is what sent me over the edge. And that small group was the last small group that I did. And I hate talking about that group because I did get so much from this church and I got so much out of this small group. And I think that's all the small groups I did through that church. That was the first time that I'd heard the gospel, so I think they do, there is a lot of goodness that comes from it. But when I saw where it was dangerous is that when you start having that kind of like group mentality, you can't ask questions about anything. If I started asking questions about politics or suggesting like, hey, maybe this isn't our guy, that gets shut down real quick.
And isn't that the pain in all of this, really, that I think all of us can say, yeah, I can point to those people in the church, and I love them, and they impacted my life in such a positive way. And so it's very much a tearing away when we start to say, but I can't be a part of this anymore, isn't it?
Yeah.
What did that look like for you?
It was like a slow fade. There's just kind of a slow fade. So,
tell us about the slow fade. How did that go?
Well, I think I never really fit in with these groups. So I tried some different small groups and now I was in recovery. Being in recovery, you're processing a lot, and I was not in a good place mentally, and I think probably very difficult to be around anyway. But I just never quite fit in any of these groups. And in retrospect, I think a lot of it was like the conservative beliefs that I've always, even when I was conservative, even when I was, watching Bill O'Reilly, I still was pro gay marriage, LGBTQ rights. I have a gay uncle, I grew up with a gay uncle. And so that was one of the things that I just never, I've always been for gay marriage.
So it's almost like we're in this relationship in our churches where we love it. And then there's like this horrible outlier thing that we just don't like, but we kind of ignore it because.
Yeah. So the slow fade, I just felt like I just never really fit in. And I just didn't go back to that small group. I never, I didn't seek out any other small groups, and nobody's reached out to me. Nobody did. Which I think is common. That's what most people have said, that when they've left their church or left, that people don't, they don't reach out.
Yeah.
But I think it's, in retrospect, I think it's okay. I think in these churches, like the small groups become an idol in a way. Because one of the things I noticed is when I wasn't active in the church, when I wasn't in a small group, I felt like very far from God, And
was that a spoken thing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was it a spoken thing that you need to be in a small group, or you're?
Oh, well, so the small group is huge. Like, there's so much pressure to be in a small group, so much pressure. But no, I just personally felt like I wasn't being fed spiritually. And so I did realize that a lot of the small group and a lot of the community and everything, like, it wasn't so much about my relationship with God. It was the community that had become an idol. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but yeah, there's so much pressure to do the small groups. I mean, immediately it's the whole, like, they do the whole like growth track, you get in immediately. They want you on the growth track. They want you serving. They want you in that small group, accountability, community. Do not be yoked with nonbelievers. And
like, so, not just in marriage, but in life.
Like, do not be yoked with nonbelievers.
That's fairly cultish.
Yeah. I used to joke about it being a cult because people all over town, they talk about it being a cult. And I would say, well, I'm super happy. I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm in a cult. I guess I'm in a cult and I don't care because I'm happy. And, but yeah, the problem with that is then, when you've got all your eggs in one basket, when this is your whole life, this church is your whole life, these are your friends. Then when everybody's like, hey, we should vote for this horrible, con man, adulterer, foul-mouthed asshole. Sorry, can I say that on here?
Absolutely.
Right.
Hell yeah, you can.
So then when you're like, maybe I don't know about this guy, if you don't agree, where do you go? Like how,
Yeah. I think that goes along with you made the interesting statement that community was an idol. Talk a little bit more about that. Idolatry obviously is the number one command of the Old Testament. What is the danger of your community being an idol? What was the danger you saw in that?
Well, I think it's probably just having all of your faith, hope, and trust like wrapped up in people, Yeah. So then when they let you down, then when things like this happened with Trump, I mean, that's what was so heartbreaking. It was like I have so much faith and hope and trust in this community of people who I love, so dearly, and then something so big like this Trumpism, it's really, devastating. And I left feeling like angry. I'm now experiencing this anger with God.
I want to come back to that. I was just going to say, though, that if your community, I think that's right on, that community is an idol, because then it becomes really important to defend the narrative. Then defending what your group believes becomes more important than a pursuit of truth, really. And in the end, you can be deceived because it's just so important to defend the narrative rather than hear something that disagrees with your community.
Right.
Because we're afraid. We're afraid of losing that community. And I think that's just a really natural human response. Right.
Because where do you go? Where do you go with this whole deconstructing thing? Like there's, there is now, but there's not a big community for this, or there hasn't been a community for this. There hasn't been leadership with this, it's easier. I think it's just easier to stay. A lot of times I think, it's just easier for people to stay and not question anything. The other thing they talked about a lot was your feelings lie to you. That was do not be yoked. And then those are the two, and your feelings lie to you, so that anything that you start to think that goes against what you're being fed is the devil. It's that there's a lot of devil talk. Are you familiar with devil talk?
I am. Yes, of course. Well, I mean, is devil talk a thing? I don't know if I've heard that exact term before.
No, that's just the way of saying it. I didn't, because I was in a, Methodist church before. Like I guess when I was much younger in church, they talked about the devil, but I hadn't heard they talk about the devil more than they talk about Jesus, I feel.
That's so true. And the devil's always coming with deception.
He's always on the prowl. And it's really part of the hardest part of deconstructing, and it's getting better, but like the voice in my head, because there was a day where I would have really had a lot of anxiety about this and had thought this is just the devil, like Pastor Paul's just the devil wanting to, this is the enemy. You're being a voice for the enemy.
I hear that on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah. So, but it was so I lost my voice last week, and I was going to meet. So I met up with April and Abby and Rachel. With this,
those are some other pretty prominent TikTokers in our space that we enjoy.
So we had the Jezebel, Jezebel get together. But I lost my voice, and I came in and said, Like there was a day where I would have said, this is just the devil trying to silence me, or this is weird stuff, some of the stuff that goes through my head with the devil talk. It's a mind fuck.
And you're still hearing those voices
Sometimes.
Mm.
And I can't imagine, like, because I didn't really get into this until, we're talking like a few years in my 30s,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be like to grow up in this, and to how I can't imagine. I have so much compassion for people who are trying to deconstruct who this has been their life for, because even just these few years alone was enough to make me very fearful. And
I think your story is so important to hear, and why I love what you're doing on TikTok is because I hear it from people all the time. Like, well, but what if it is just about winning people for Christ? And what if Jesus is going to say, I never knew you? And what if God is turning his back on me because I'm a sinner? And what if I am being deceived from the devil? And so I think it's really important for people to hear stories like yours, that you have had to and still wrestle with those things on an ongoing basis. But I'm assuming you would affirm to people, it's a journey that's worth it.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. Why would you say that?
I don't know, because I feel like seeking the truth. I do feel like I don't know anything. I don't know, but I feel like I'm on the path to truth, and I feel like where I was, and again, as much as this church did a lot of good for me, I do think they have it wrong. They have it wrong. And I'm very passionate, really about the LGBTQ community. And I will no longer be part of an organization that is not, or, church that isn't affirming.
So there's a freedom that comes with stepping out.
There's a freedom. Yes, there's a freedom. Absolutely. That comes with leaving, with seeking truth, and I really feel like now, like I'm living the life that Jesus would want me to live. I do feel very confident in that. I think they call them like red letter Christians or something, or some people always accuse me of, loving everybody straight to hell. But I'm more focused on the gospel, on the teachings of Jesus. And I feel like the way that I'm living now, I feel like I'm living closer to how Jesus would want me to live.
Yeah, I love that.
Versus out there just, winning souls for Christ, and it's all like pointing people to the gospel and letting God change their hearts, And when they talk about that, they're talking about like LGBTQ, like if we just point people to Christ, God will change their hearts. And
I think there's always been a feel of, for me, of like, I just want to love people in the midst of this. But I was compelled and taught to teach them that they're terrible and sinners and unhappy. And I'm really glad to not have to do that anymore. I do want to show people one of your TikToks. Okay. So we were looking up one earlier. Let me see if I can find it. Do you need to set up for this, or do we just go to it?
No, you can. Well, this is one of my earlier TikToks that got a lot of, I got a lot of followers from this.
Okay. All right. Hang on one second. Let me get some sound here. And we'll get you going here.
What's a recovering Christian? I no longer identify as a Christian, not because I don't love Jesus, but because I do. Christianity is no longer about Jesus. And I'm starting to wonder if it ever was, that Christians today have all of their faith and hope and trust wrapped up in one person, and it ain't Jesus. So I can't support Trump, and apparently the two go hand in hand now. It's idol worship. I don't see how people don't see that. And God's imperfect vessel. God uses sinners, sure, but this guy, he's not repentant. There are no fruits of the Spirit there, and it's crazy to me that people follow him. So, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm on my own faith walk, my own lonely faith walk, and trying to see the Gospels with a different set of eyes, and trying to make sense of everything. I feel like I've been deceived by people who have led and taught me over the years. So I still love Jesus, just not like that.
Wow. That's telling it like it is.
Yeah. But yeah, that was one of my yeah, Christianity isn't about Jesus, and I don't know that it ever was. So, I feel like, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the blessing of the season of Donald Trump is that the heart, or maybe I would say the roots of evangelicalism and right-wing Christianity have been exposed. And I think it's ugly and messy and smelly and necessary. And I think it's very important that people like you are out there saying, hey guys, look at this. This is not okay. And, Jesus said, if a tree doesn't bear fruit, you cut it off at the roots and you throw it in the fire. And when he said that, he was talking about God's people that were supposed to be taking God's message to the world, but instead had become very self-protective and self-important and self-righteous. And Jesus said, yeah, we need to cut that thing off at the roots and throw it in the fire. And you see that temple over there, not one stone's going to stand on another. And I guess, sorry, not to preach to you, but I feel very much like Jesus is saying in this season, you see those churches? Time for them to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're really hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, maybe the roots of it have always been bad. We were just better at covering it up.
Right. Well, it's really like taking me down this rabbit hole, because if it's, once I realized that this particular church, and I do believe that it's a political machine. People talk about it being about money, but I think it's also about politics. And so if it's really like all about politics now, like, has it always been about some agenda? If it's not about Jesus now, was it ever about Jesus? It just really has made me question like everything, was I lied to about the cross? Like what else, what's real?
I want to go back to your point about being angry at God, but we're going to wrap up this part of the public podcast. And if you guys want to hear some more of Lindsay's story and our conversation, you can go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/NPE podcast. Tell people real quick where they can find you, Lindsay.
Oh, I'm on TikTok. It's Beham Blue Dot. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, Beham Blue Dot.
You're my only friend from Birmingham, so I'm glad to have this discussion. We'll continue it on Patreon.